get started. So, first of all, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar, Make Your Web PDPs POP, where we're going to teach you our learnings, our observations from 30 brands, of the best brands we've measured in terms of the number of sales it does on Shopify. And we're going to break down the art and science of making high converting PDPs, right? So, a little introduction about myself. I'm Nishant. I'm your friendly product marketing manager who looks after all things marketing here at BIK and Manifest. And I'm super excited to be able to join and speak to you all and teach you some of the learnings that we found in terms of auditing these PDPs and seeing what works and what doesn't, right? And in that process, I'd love to sort of get to know all of you. I'd love to, sort of see what you're thinking about and, what are some of the objectives that you've set forth, right? Now, just a little context about Manifest. We are a shopping assistant. We deploy AI agents on your website that basically does the selling, that does the supporting, and all things for you, right? So it's basically giving that conversational experience, that true conversational commerce experience on your website for your brand, and we're getting your best performing salesperson on site, right? Now we have more than 600 brands that are working with us. We are backed by Y Combinator, Sequoia, and the Chain Smokers. We are Shopify partners. We are also BSPs for BIG. And we've had a lot of prominent folks in tech mention us, like A16 and so on and so forth, right? So that's the kind of track record. We've been working with brands like Durex, Transformer Table, Lego My Brick House, Wonder Chef, so on and so forth. Some of the best brands that have trusted us and used the service, and they're making best possible use cases. And we're seeing some really interesting use cases that are coming out that is on site or even on, let me say, WhatsApp or Instagram and all these channels, right? So that's a little introduction about us. And without further ado, let's quickly dive in to the research part, right? Now, before we jump in, let me set a little precedent. So we audited some of the best brands that are out there. We took 30 brands in terms of D2C, and we took 30 brands that are on Shopify and who are doing really high volumes of sales, right? And why we particularly chose this sort of a topic, or why we wanted to do this, was two things. Okay. One is, number one, the universal truth that we all know. Your PDPs is an absolute monster, right? It has to be that monstrous thing because that's your best performing salesperson. That's the one that makes the impression, right? Whenever somebody lands on your site, whenever someone lands on your product page, right? That's the thing that's going to do the convincing to the customers. And second of all, attention spans are dwindling, and that we know it, right? Back then, maybe a couple of years ago, our attention spans were more than 8 seconds. We were like 10 seconds, 12 seconds. But now we're below 8 seconds, which is almost below what a goldfish span is, right? And that's kind of alarming considering the situation that we have in terms of how much instant gratification is there. So in that case, the job of the PDP is to ensure how much are we capturing at attention, right? How much are we able to retain them? And how are we able to tell that story within that short span of time so that they either choose to stay there and look further or they go ahead and make that purchase, right? That is the objective of a product page. That's what it should be, right? So in that case, we have to look at how we are going to be able to minimize, how we are able to, convince them and how we're able to show them what they want within that time period very effectively, right? Now, I'll give you a quick overview, or I'll give you rather a quick sort of insight that we were able to see in terms of what these PDPs are doing and what is missing or what kind of patterns are we seeing. And then we will go dive deep into each of it, right? Number one, we have trust signals. That is the most important thing. Whenever a customer is evaluating a particular product, they see trust signals. They want to see the star ratings. They want to see how many people, basically went ahead and gave that review, right? Sometimes that trust signal also makes and breaks a decision in terms of, do we want to go further into the product. That's one thing. Sometimes you find that they are buried or they might be missing entirely, or they could be in the wrong position, which we look at how we can fix, right? Second thing is friction reducers. Now, what do we mean by friction reducers? Now, one of the key parts that we want to look at is the add to cart button. Now, besides add to cart button, we have to see few buttons or few pieces of information that needs to be shown to the customer. Like, for instance, that could be free shipping, or that could be about return policy, or that could be maybe loyalty points, or that could also be, in terms of your buy now pay laters, right? That is, if you have easy installments and so on and so forth. We are seeing these little nuances, actually drive more towards increasing, conversion rates, right? And the third thing, which is almost universally absent, even with some of the biggest brands that we're seeing, even in terms of, most of the brands that are coming out there, right? But which the trend is changing and people are evolving towards it, is personalization. That is on-site personalization. Right now, typically all your PDPs are meant to be static, where you put a certain piece of information and you put those blocks and that's done, right? But now, how are we going to be able to personalize it? How are we able to, tackle it for different customers? How are we able to make sure that it drives conversion? It's able to, it's be tailor-made for each one of them, right? That is absent, but that trend is also changing, where brands are actually starting to, basically, look at personalization very critically in terms of how to implement, right? Now, what we did with these 30 brands, now what we did with that is basically we scored them on the scale of on a mark of 25 points, right? And we used five different parameters to score them. Number one is above fold clarity. What that means is, let me say that when the moment when somebody opens up the product page, right? Are they able to get the clear information about the product? Are they able to see the price? Are they able to see the review? And without scrolling, right? How much of information are they able to, sort of digest within 3 seconds without the need for scrolling? That's our first proxy. The second proxy is visual quality. Like for instance, if you had to place a simple, if you had to sort of put your product in a simple place with a white background and all that stuff, versus are you using UGC to your favor? Are you using videos? Are you using lifestyle images where people are holding or doing something with the product, right? Because that's when people are able to associate with the product, right, really well when they're able to, visualize it as a part of their lifestyle, right? How is that implemented? So we are looking at that. The third thing that we're seeing is in terms of trust signals. Are we seeing reviews? Are we seeing reviews, like ratings? Where is it visible? Is that in terms of the title? Is that in terms of the CTA? All of that stuff. The fourth thing is we're looking at friction reducers, like the information that we had mentioned. That is in terms of shipping information, that is in terms of buy now, pay later, that is in terms of return, exchange, refund, all that vital information that a customer needs to know before they go ahead and add to cart, right? That thing. And finally, personalization. That is in terms of, are we stimulating urgency signals? Are we having static content or is it dynamic content? Are we having a conversational entry point for someone to, go ahead and speak? So all of those things we're looking at in terms of evaluation, right? These are the things, and we will evaluate them on a scale of 5 for each proxy, right? Now, let's do an activity, right? Now, what I'll do is I will share one product page, okay, in the chat box. I want you to take this proxy and I want you all to score it and share your scores in the chat box, right? I'd love to read, I'd love to sort of think, how you are scoring and what kind of numbers are we able to see for a particular product page, right? So let me quickly go ahead and share that product page in the description, right? Give me a second. Okay, so I have dropped the product page in the description. And I think one pattern that I'm seeing in general is that, personalization turns out to be slightly on the lower side. But I think I also have, has raised a very interesting point over here, which is very cool. Um, yeah, awesome. Awesome, guys. I mean, thank you so much for taking the time and doing the activity. That's really very interesting to see the way you're able to pursue, you're looking at this, point, right? Now, what we will do is basically, now that we have the scores in place, right? This is what we actually did for all the 30 brands to evaluate, how they are doing it, right? What is it that they're doing best and, where there are gaps. And if there are gaps, what are the ways in which we can fix the gap, right? What are the kind of actions we can take for doing that. But let's also go over the next slide and let's see one particular thing, right? Even some of the biggest brands that we've seen in this sort of audit, right? Even they had their flaws, right? They had like, little nitty-gritties that maybe that could be improved. Like for instance, let's say Bath and Body Works, right? Which is one of the biggest brands in terms of, candles and that kind of stuff, right? Now, what they have is they have zero reviews despite being such a large brand, such a massive brand, right? They have absolutely no reviews and they have no, social proofing whatsoever, right? There is no way for me to see reviews. Maybe the only place that I would be getting reviews is through UGC, or that could probably be through Reddit. But as a customer, as someone who's actually in the PDP, right? I would not want to go to a different place, or I would not want to go to a different website or another channel to basically source reviews. And that's a big point of friction, right? You get the idea. And same for Fashion Nova as well, right? Fashion Nova is huge in terms of, fast fashion, right, in the US. But what they're also having is they don't have reviews on the product page at all. And in fact, at least Bath and Body Works, they were able to hide and they did not say anything in the title that said no reviews. But Fashion Nova actually has this thing where for each PDP, right, for each particular product, it says no reviews. right? It literally says no reviews, and that is kind of a demotivating factor, right? When you see that for every particular product page, it's actually better to have that placeholder not being shown at all versus simply saying no reviews, right? That is one thing. Now, the third thing is, let's say Funko, for example. Funko is selling merch and they're selling, sort of collectibles, which is trending right now in the US. And what they're doing is they have free shipping on the top of the page as a sticky layout, right? However, that being said, it is not there for every product page. It is not there right below the add to cart button where the conversion actually takes place. That's where people want to know. And for me personally, it's super easy to close it and then go ahead with the next part, right? So that vital piece of information that a customer needs to know is missing, right? And the next thing is even Fenty Beauty, which we all know is one of the biggest brands, and it's run by Rihanna herself, right? Now here, what they've done is they've locked free shipping and returns behind a sign up wall. If I have to avail these services, I have to be a part of their, the part of the database. I have to create an account to basically ensure that I get access to free shipping and I get access to returns, right? Now, maybe that could also be a play in terms of trying to get more users on board. But that being said, this is necessary piece of information that as a customer I would need, or all of us would need to know in order to get the conversion, right? Or in order to build the trust and build the clarity, which should not be locked behind a sign up wall, right? So these are some of the things that even some bigger brands are doing. And maybe they might have different rationales, but it's a gap that is universal. It's not that they've completely aced it or nailed it to the core, but they also have these little niggles that we can that they have also done. And now what we have is we have the scores for each of the brand that we have rated. Now you can see in this list we have some really big brands like Converse, we have Patagonia, we have Yeti, Vera Bradley, Gymshark for that matter, Comfort, we have Sol de Janeiro, which has scored a perfect 25. And what I will do is I will open the product page and show you how that works, right? But you can see what's going on. You can essentially see that a lot of brands we have scored in this particular parameter. And we have more such brands over here in this place as well, right? This is the place where it actually goes to the bottom. And interestingly enough, if you notice over here, you're seeing brands like Bates and Body Works, we're seeing Ralph Lauren, we're seeing Tiffany and Co., where they're actually going down in terms of, let me say, clarity, in terms of, how much are they optimizing for friction, and, what is like the total scores and all that, right? So for this particular data set, which we've scored, we have something at the end of the webinar. So please stay tuned for that, but, which we will share with all of you. Now, what we are going to do is let's look at what are the things that are wrong and then how we can fix it, right? And the first thing that you're seeing is trust signals being in the wrong place, right? And what we found as a part of the audit was that at least 7 brands out of 30, right, they had no reviews whatsoever at all, right? And there were brands where I had to scroll all the way to the bottom, or I had to keep scrolling until I was able to find anything of a semblance in terms of reviews, right? Now, this is not how things should be, because the moment I land on that particular product page, the first thing that I should be assured of is the number of reviews that are there, because that's when I know that it's not just me. There are a lot of other people who have used or bought that particular product, and that turns out to be a testament, right? And that testament turns out to be super important. Like for instance, if you see that the above fold section of Converse's brand, which sells their famous sneakers, you can see that right at the very bottom they have 5 stars. They have the stars and they have the star rating and the number of people that have reviewed it as well, right? That builds confidence, that makes it easy for me to go ahead and see what's next, right? Because that's assuring, as a matter of fact, that okay, there are all these people who have already done that, so which means the product is good, the product is doing what it's intended to do. Let me basically go ahead and explore it further, right? That is the whole point. Now if you see the same for Ralph Lauren, right, which is again a very premium brand, which is one of the bigger brands in this space, they have 0 reviews, right? It could be and that could be in terms of any average order value. Like I took 21,000 as an example, but you can see, right? If I see this, there is absolutely no reviews over here. And that is not very assuring, as a matter of fact, right? This is not just for bigger brands, even smaller brands are doing the same thing, where there is no reviews right at the above fold section, right? In this place where it should be, which causes friction, right? Which does not give me that assurance, or which does not give us that sort of confidence to go ahead and, explore it further. And that's one of the first few things that grab attention. So in that case, that hook is missing, and that is very vital for it to be there, right? This is in terms of social profile. or trust building essentially. Now the next thing is in terms of friction reducers. Now what do we want to call friction reducers, right? We want to basically incorporate vital information that will drive them towards checkout, and those pieces of information could be in terms of shipping, in terms of returns and exchange policies, or in terms of are we offering buy now pay later services, or what kind of or payment offerings we offer the customer, right? Because that also plays a very key role in terms of helping them decide what to do next, helping them decide whether if they want to go buy it or not. Because especially considering the surge of BNPLs, like for instance in the US we have Klarna Afterpay, or here we have Snapmint and all that, right? We should be seeing that there could be more conversions coming in from this, right? Because people prefer the habit of buying it once and then paying it in smaller chunks of installments, right? That makes it so much easier for them to purchase. But if that piece of information is missing, and if it is in the wrong place, right, that also breaks the entire journey, right? Now if we had to look at it in terms of an example, you can check over here. This is Shark Ninja, a brand where they are basically have the add to cart button, and then they share the vital information that's needed. Like for instance, something, you have your affirm payment, you have your free shipping information, and you also, which is right at the add to cart button. So in that case, I know for a fact that okay, there is buy now pay later. Let me go to the next step. Let me put the product in the cart and let me go ahead and maybe go ahead and check out, right? So that sort of those are conversion drivers that we have. And if that is missing, like for instance in this case, which is Starter Cosmetics, this particular website has very beautiful visuals, and even the website is super minimalistic, right? And very clean visuals, clean style. But one vital information that they're missing is this over here. What we're seeing instead is an upsell, right? And having that right at the very bottom could only mean that we're only trying to push more for sales, right? That's the whole point. I mean, it's great to have an upsell nudge, but without this vital piece of information which we are trying to get them to convert one particular product, having this does not really make sense. So in that case, we need to incorporate that. That is, the shipping information and the BNP as information right at the bottom, right? So that, makes it more confident for the customer to go ahead and buy, right? Now let's look at the third thing, that is personalization, which turns out to be a big blind spot. Because what we've done so far is we've built static pages, right? Where we place certain blocks over here and then we call it a day. Like we can, we have structure. But now because there is so much happening in terms of the kind of behavior that we're able to gauge from site, or let me say in terms of people using AI and the kind of expectations that they're getting out of it, right? Like right now all of us have universal consensus, right? We are using Claude, we're using ChatGPT, we're using Gemini, and we're using it in our day-to-day lives. Even shoppers are doing the same thing, right? Now they're not looking at it from a perspective where I want to go ahead and maybe scroll through Reddit, or I want to go to Instagram, or I want to check YouTube videos and see what people are talking about it. People are asking questions. People want to sort of, they want to have that conversation, like one-on-one conversation, like how uh, we would go ahead and maybe approach a salesperson at a retail store. That kinds of conversations are happening right now. And in that case, how are we optimizing that PDP to ensure that those conversations are happening in place, right? Otherwise, what would typically end up happening is when such entry points or when such levers are not there, people would end up going to ChatGPT, or they would go to other sources, so that the ball is not in your court at that point, unless you choose to retarget them, right? This turns out to be a massive, massive blind spot. Now, what I would do is I'll share a very positive example of how this is implemented, right? Not just in terms of personalization, but in terms of everything in general. This is Sol de Janeiro, right? Let me go ahead and quickly share my screen for that one, right? Just give me a moment. Uh, I hope my screen is visible. Okay. Now, what we're having is, let's take this one particular product, one of the best-selling products over here, right? Okay, let me see if I can close this. Yeah. And there's a lot to go through. So what you're seeing right here is that the moment we land in on the site, right, we're able to see, the social proofing. We're able to see, basically in terms of the kind of friction reducers that you're seeing, even the visuals, right? We see very different kind of visuals over here. And more than just that, what they've done, right, is that they've added some very little touches, subtle touches that actually contribute more towards conversions. That is, for example, saying, something is sold every 4 seconds, or, something like that, right? So these are things that will actually build that sort of assurance, or let me say confidence, while we're trying to go ahead and approach, basically conversion point, right? And they also have a chat interface right over here that you've seen, right? Which is also super easy to implement. Like, for instance, if I have a particular question in terms of, let me say, whether if this ingredient is compatible, or how do I use it, or which part of the day when I use it for, or how does it compare to a specific product, or let me say, how do I integrate it in my routine, right? So these are questions that's gonna have we're gonna be having. So one way to sort of look at it is we keep browsing different places, and then we try to get answers, or we have that sort of conversational assistance right over here on site, right, where you can actually ask and you get the answers that you want. So that we have to make that we can also enable over here and sort of make it, sort of, friction free for them, right? So back to the presentation. Just give me a second. Now, in contrast, what we see is this brand called Asics, right? Which is a pretty big shoe brand that you can see, right? Now, here, what we have is we have no signs of social proofing, or we have no ways to sort of ask any questions about, sort of what this is all about. And then there is so much information, so many different things going on, that it is not feeling very personalized. Like, there is like so much happening in this particular site, right? How can we enable that sort of personalization? Maybe we can put a little bit of urgency that, these many people are looking at it at a particular point in time, or, maybe we can have a chat interface that's going on over there, right? So that information is missing in terms of, how we're able to sort of customize. Okay. Now, while we are at it, there is also certain exception that we need to look at, in terms of, like, let's say, for example, we have evaluated Tiffany and Co. We have evaluated Ralph Lauren. We have seen Alo Yoga and all these brands, right? Now, they do not have reviews, but the thing is, maybe the brand has been there historically for a very long time. They've been around for multiple years, and they know that, Tiffany and Co. is a premium brand, right? That's the kind of aspirational values that they've built over here. Or let me say Patagonia, for instance, where they have no urgency signals. Like, for instance, these many people are buying it, or these many people are looking at it right now. Or maybe Aloe Yoga, for that instance, right? They do not have a BNP and all that stuff, right? But this comes in from a position where it has been rooted in ethos. Like, for instance, Patagonia as a brand is not pro consumerism. They're like anti consumerism. They're like buy once and forget about it. That's the kind of ethos that they follow. So, in that case, having this would actually contradict, what they stand for, right? So that's the kind of nuance that we should be looking at. Or even in terms of Tiffany and Co, they don't need that sort of review, because they know that if they buy, they're getting an experience, not just a product. They're getting an entire experience. But that being said, while that is being highlighted, these brands have been there for a really long time, right? For example, if I buy from Tiffany and Co, or if I buy from Ralph Lauren, like, this brand in itself is a testament, and that has taken so many years for us to, build it, and so many years for us to sort of get to that level where, I don't need to see reviews. I can just go ahead and, make that purchase, right? And that is something that has taken a long time. But so they're comfortable enough to the point where they can break the rules. They've played by the rules all this while, and now they can break it. But until then, until for brands that are growing, and brands that are trying to establish digital presence, and brands that are trying to build loyalty, and, sort of retain, right? For that, we need to make sure that, we're following these rules, or we're basically, sort of optimizing that product page in such a way that it turns out to be your best performing salesperson that's on site, right? That's able to drive people to the cart, and then eventually go ahead and convert. So we have to look at all these things. Now, what we will do is, let's look at the approaches that we can take also before we sort of jump into solutioning. This is a question that we should be asking ourselves. Do we want an experience first kind of a product page, or do we want a clarity first kind of product page, right? Now, what do we mean by a clarity first PDP? Is to ensure that every single thing that goes on the product page is meant to drive conversion. That is the wordings, that is the kind of convenience placements that we have, the images that we put, or, all of those information, maybe like a chat book, for instance. How are we building it in such a way that it works for the first 8 seconds for people to convert? That is for clarity. And if you want to do completely experience wise, where people see the product as much as possible, right, where you want to show and put it in the forefront, it may not drive conversions right off the bat, but if that's the kind of approach that we want to take, then we go for an experience first sort of, approach that we can go for the product page itself, right? Now, moving on again, this what we've seen is if we look at clarity first as an experience, now what we see with the scoring or what we've basically sort of understood is that this is a kind of average that we see with the data that we have, right? Where generally the above fold clarity is always at a 4 star, so they want the hook is always nailed perfectly, and then the visuals, like for instance, how are they seamlessly blending UGC and product placements and the images and stuff, right? How are they sort of putting it together that we are saying like an average of maybe 3.9. Somewhere where it's falling apart is maybe in terms of reviews. Maybe some brands have put it right at the very beginning, some brands have put it at the end, and some don't have reviews at all. Like for instance, Fashion Nova that we basically mentioned earlier, right? Those are like the kind of exceptions that we see. So trust building, it goes down, which obviously needs a lot of work. And then we're seeing 3.1 in terms of friction. Again, people are doing good in terms of how we are able to sort of tell the last few bits of information that we need to know before the checkout happens. That being said, um, there are certain avenues for improvement, like for instance, maybe if you can include the BNPL, if we can include shipping information and all that stuff. But we are seeing universally across the board where personalization is taking a low score, right? Where it's basically 2.4 and so on and so forth, right? Now let's look at the fixes part. Let's look at what are the things that we can implement right off the bat, right? So that we can fix it. Okay. Number one is to make sure that your product reviews go right below the title. The title is the hook of the product page, right? Now we want to show them that snippet of number of people that have reviewed right at the very beginning if we have reviews, right? So one best suggestion that you can go ahead to do is like bring the reviews right below the product title itself, right? Or if you have like an AI summarizer, then you can bring an AI summary of reviews as well. Essentially, the moment somebody opens up the product page, the first thing that they get to see is the reviews, right? That's the most important thing. And if they see that, it's going to add a layer of assurance. Now, the second thing that you can obviously look at is add a three-line reassurance strip, right? That is in terms of, secure payment, in terms of whether if you're offering free shipping, and when do we offer free shipping that is maybe below a certain cart value, like maybe free shipping above orders of 2,000 rupees or whatever that could be, right? So that kind of information, and then even maybe like a buy now, pay later information, because that will obviously ease down the friction and make it easier for them to take the decision. So those bits of reassurance right below the cart button, add to cart button, right? That's where it needs to be. We can add them over here as well, right? Now the third thing that we want to do is add UGC. And now, if you're someone who's actually, building UGC, you're having those content blogs, you're having people making reels about you, you're having people take pictures or, like so some real photos and videos from real people, right? That deserves to be there in the PDP because that's what makes the entire experience more social, right? People want to see real people doing different things. And that's where Instagram is also coming in, right? A lot of people are influenced to essentially go ahead and check out the product and make the next step, right? So what if you're able to bring that into the product page itself, right? We can have certain video blogs on the PDP, right? Maybe right below the product images, or maybe some have a section as well where you have UGC videos. So that will do a lot more selling than a lot of textual information, right? Because that's real people. That's your everyday average folk, using your product and sort of making um, it integrated with the lifestyle, right? Which makes a lot more sense. And finally, we can also do one thing that is we can add a chat widget. That is, maybe wherever possible, if you have a conversational entry point, right? That would also make it super easy because, like for instance, as a customer, I could be having certain doubts and I would be having certain questions. Whether is it easier for me to open up different tabs and ask those questions versus whether is it easy for me to ask those questions right then and there, right? Where I have a simple widget where I ask my question and I get my answer that clears that basically clears the kind of doubt that I have in my head, and that will proceed to making me go ahead and go for the checkout, right? So that's a very simple fix that we can have, right? These are like the simplest and the most lowest hanging fruits in terms of what we can fix. Or there are also certain things that we can basically steal from other people. Like for instance, there is this brand that we saw called Hoka, right? Now what they've done is for every particular product that they're selling, right? Now they have this certain thing called number of views that's happening in a day, like how many people are checking it out in a day, which I think is really interesting because it actually simulates a certain sense of urgency. Let me try to show you, right? Um, okay, let me share the screen now. Yeah. So what you're seeing right now here, right? I hope the screen is visible. So you can see that this particular sort of thing is happening because you're seeing that, okay, these many people are viewing in the past day. And something very interesting about this particular widget is it's happening real time. Like, the last time when I refreshed and saw it at 14,777. Now it's increasing more and more, right? So that adds on to that sort of urgency factor. Or let me say, number of people that are evaluating it real time. And it's a very subtle placement, but yet it gets its job done pretty effectively, right? So that's one little thing that obviously we can steal and sort of try incorporating in the product page. And the next thing is maybe in terms of, I sold one every 4 seconds as well, right? The one example that I took from Sol de Janeiro. Now here you can see, right? This thing is a little text, but it's also something, if I hover over it, it's taken from data. This is like rooted in data. So this adds a very quiet layer of confidence that, basically this is what's happening every 4 seconds. One is moving every 4 seconds. It's like that, okay, it's moving fast. And it also gives me a sort of confidence to basically go ahead and say, hey, maybe we should go and check it out, right? So that's a very simple but a very effective confidence move that we are also seeing over here. And the third thing is in terms of UGC. Let me bring that example as well. Right now, if we look at this brand called Base Travel, which again, they've made some very beautiful PDPs. I recommend you go check it out. Now, now, if you see this, if you see one of the product pages that they have, right? Now, right at the very section, right at this point, right, within the first few seconds that I'm here, I can see videos. I can see UGC videos right over here, right? If it loads, that is. No, you get to go to the airport tomorrow. Airport? I'm not going to. And that is something that we can actually go ahead and implement right from the get-go, right? Because that's more grounded in reality. And that's something that I'm able to see right over here. And there are a lot of folks that are doing it really well over here in India as well, right? So I suggest this is something that we can actually go ahead and, sort of implement over here so that it actually, adds on to the trust building confidence. And every other thing, every other fundamental that we've also mentioned over here is also done right. That is in terms of number of reviews, maybe in terms of how much are they reducing friction, and how much, and even the UGC bit as well, right? So these are things that people get to see the first, and then if they want to scroll down, they could do it as well. So, but at the first few seconds itself, we have the attention, right? Which is what makes it super easy to win, right? And maybe even the last one for that matter is an AI generated review summary. Like I'm sure that you might have seen this happening in a lot of websites, but again, like for instance, if here this is a static sort of thing where number of people that have given a star rating and number of reviews that are there. But if you're able to see a review summary right at the very beginning, that is in terms of, hey, customers are telling this and that. They're talking about, okay, this product does this for me and it works really well and generally well and stuff, right? Where you would be working really hard to incentivize them to get those reviews, right? You'd be sending a post-purchase flow where you try to get them a review, or you might have even given them like a gratification or like a discount to get that review. We can make the best use of that by getting a summary right at the very beginning. Like for example, if we see one of the examples from Atari, right, or any other brand, right, that happens that this review comes right at the very beginning itself, right? That's something that we can go ahead and easily implement as well. So these are few items that we can definitely steal, right? Now let me get back to the presentation. Uh, just a second. I hope I'm back up. Awesome. Now, what we did, at Manifest, what we sort of did is we also took all of these inputs, whatever we found from our research, whatever we were able to gather, and we made a mock-up of a product page, right? We've been doing this two ways. One is we've also been helping brands implement chat interfaces right at the very beginning, or let me say on their website. But what we did as a twist for this sort of chat, for this webinar, right, as a challenge, is we took all these best practices and then we made it a conversational PDP mock-up that you can check out. Right now, let me go over that. Let me go to the next slide and let me walk you through what we've sort of went ahead with and what is the thought process that we went with, right? Now, first thing that you're seeing is basically right at the very beginning of the PDP, you have the visuals where, there's like a lifestyle visual, there is, all that. And then you have basically right below the title, you have a, sort of all the trust building activities. So you have the number of ratings, you have the stars and all that stuff, right? And obviously the sizes over here. But what we've also done over here basically is added an embed which is very relevant to this particular product. That is, we've added a usage instruction embed. What this does is whenever I click on this particular embed, right, you get this sort of an output. That is, how do I use it? How do I use this particular product? Because see, One of the challenges that people are going to face is once they buy it, they're going to not know about where do they use it or how do they use it, which part of the routine do they want to integrate that particular thing in, right? So that thing gets very easily answered, right? This is what they get to see. And one more thing that we also incorporated is, let's say, number of people who are looking at it at a particular point in time, right? That sort of urgency building is also done. And then we have also added the sort of friction reducers that is necessary before, let me say, before it goes to the checkout part, right? Where we have the afterpay iteration, we have the free shipping, we have the payment security, we have the return policy as well, right? And another interesting thing that we can also go ahead and think about is basically, have a chat widget, but that does not simply stick to the side as a chat widget, but that also has frequently asked questions. Like, for instance, what are things that customers are asking about quite frequently, or what are the pulse points, right? How are we able to capture right at the very beginning? Because right now, what they would be doing is they'd be thinking. And then they have to basically, if they have a chat widget, we have to open that up and then we have to ask that question and then you have to get the answer. But what if you're able to, get that conversation started right at the very beginning, right? That can be done over here as a widget as well. And you see this at the bottom, there is like an add to cart. This is a sticky layout. That is what happens is when you keep scrolling also, right? If let me say your customers decide to scroll because the first part of the attention building is done right and they decide to scroll, right? Now what would typically happen is the add to cart would probably be lost right up top. So we'll have to go back up again and then you add to cart. But what if you're able to implement it as a sticky add to cart button that goes with you as you keep scrolling at the very bottom, right? So that kind of an implementation can be done over here. And what we've also thought about is in terms of UGC, right? So the first thing that they scroll and see down is UGC. Now we can look at it in an alternate perspective where we sort of try to bring it right over here as well, like what we saw it in base travel, or you can have a separate section over here over this part as well, where the UGC videos are also over here. And then finally, in the last page we have the reviews, right? This can come either at the very beginning or it can also come at the end, which is basically your call, but we suggest we keep this at the very beginning itself. But what happens is this gives like a bird's eye view of what people are actually talking about, right? Like what are the things that actually stand out, or what are the things that work well in terms of a product. Like for instance, if you open up Amazon Rufus, right, like you would see customers really like the way the delivery has happened, or they like the way the product works for their skin, and they get to see the pros and cons both equally. So that's like a bird's eye view. Like it effectively saves a lot of my time in terms of scouring through reviews so that I can actually go ahead and buy. And that's where you're building this gold mine of a resource in terms of collecting reviews from customers, right? So that AI is trained on it and it answers the reviews, and within a couple of seconds I get to get the answers for whatever question that I might have, right? So this is a kind of implementation that we thought about, and we're actually doing this for so many different brands as well, right? We're not just this while this might be a mock-up, we have done this for brands like let me say Lotus or Wonder Chef, where we have implemented different kind of chat entry points for like all of the pages, and we do this for all industries, right? It's industry agnostic. You could be someone in gaming, or you could be someone selling in luxury, or it could be skincare, or FMCG, whatever it may be, right? We can have these sort of experiences built if you want to ever think about having chat experiences on site, right? Which is completely doable and which is possible, right? That's what we do at Manifest Best. That is to enable chat experiences right on site. Now, with that, we're coming to the end of the webinar. Um, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to answer. But what we're also offering with this webinar, right, that we'll be able to take away is we are giving a scoring framework. That is, how do you take this? How do you sort of like if you're building your own PDP, or if you want to compare your PDP with some of the things that you might have certain aspirational value to it, right? How do you compare them and how do you sort of incorporate, like what are things that we can incorporate, right? So that scoring framework, we will share it with you. We'll also share the entire 30 brands research data set, right? That is completely exclusive for those folks who have attended this webinar, right? Just for you all. We will share it shortly. So please feel free to just keep an eye out on the inbox. So you should be receiving a mail with the scoring framework and with the 30 brand data set. Let me quickly share that with you as well on screen. All right. Just give me a second. Uh, yeah. So if you see right over here, right, we've built this super large data set with all the observations that you might be having, right? And this is done for all 30 brands. So this sheet, we will send it over to you via email where you can look out for that. And this sheet includes every single observation and what kind of gap we have identified for all of it. This includes the overall scorecard. that is, what we how we've scored them, and what kind of observations that we have, and a template that you can use it as well. You can use it, you can evaluate your own PDP, and then you can sort of take actions. Like you can go and do it as an iterative step, and how to use this particular template. That also we have included in this particular sheet. So keep an eye out on your inboxes. You should be receiving that shortly. Apart from that, we also have a I'm just going to go back to the presentation. Just give me a second. Let's go back to the PPT once again. And we're also happy to offer is a, just give me a second. There's a little technical bug. Sorry about that. Okay, we should be right back up. And one more thing that we want to offer is we would love to maybe sort of, whenever you get time, right, we'd love to sort of audit the PDP that you have, right? Maybe we want to sort of help you figure out what are the things that you're doing right and what we can improve and how we can work on that. So if you want a free audit from us, we're going to drop a link in the chat box where you can book a call with us, and we'd be more than happy to help, right? We'd want to sort of work with you, and we want to build a high converting product page, right, that you can go ahead and sort of take action with. And along with the audit, we also have a bonus, right? Now, this is really cool. Like, I'm sure that some of you all would have used Amazon and you would have used Rufus at some point in time, right? And Rufus is really cool in a certain way that, you have those, FAQs, and you have those review summaries, you have all of that, right on site, right? And I think Amazon is very bullish in terms of the number of sales it's going to contribute. And even as a customer, right? Even as your everyday average folk, and I'm trying to go ahead and evaluate what's going on or what I want to see, right? Rufus makes it so easy for me to sort of go ahead and browse through it and ask those questions, and maybe get those answers for me, right? It's such a delight to use, right? And if you want something like that to on your website, we are happy to offer this for free for 1 month. Absolutely no questions asked. We'll help you with getting those implemented and going live, so that people can actually start asking those questions and they can actually have those conversations on your site, right? So if you want that, you can obviously go ahead and book a call on the calendar. This is exclusive for just 5 brands from this brand who want to be who are a part of the webinar. So please feel free to go ahead and block the calendar. We're ready to give it away for free for 1 month. Absolutely no questions asked, right? Thank you so much. I hope you all got to learn something, and I'd love to sort of maybe stay in touch and see what kind of implementations are you all coming up with, or if you want to book a call on the calendar, we can also do that. I'd love to jam and see how we can help. Until then, see you all on the next one. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate that. Take care and have a good one. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.